YouTube? Tire Metalhead Weatherman here. Hopefully you guys are doing well. You've enjoyed your Saturday. As promised, I'm dropping this video in regards to the next storm system that's going to be coming during the early to middle part of this week. We're going to be covering the snowy side too, but we do have a little bit of a situation unfolding. Not a major one, but a little bit of extra news. Got upgraded to a slight risk down here towards the Gulf Coast today for some severe weather. We even had a tornado report and several wind reports today in Louisiana. There's still a tornado watch in effect, probably for the next 2-3 hours for the Gulf Coast parts of Alabama and some of the panhandle of Florida. So a water spout or maybe inland water spout or tornado can't be ruled out, but that's pretty much what we have going on for tonight. We'll quickly talk about that, and then we will go into the storm system that's expected next week. So this is what we have going on right now. This is about maybe an hour ago is what this radar image is probably going to look like. It's pretty identical, but we move through, and it's mainly going to be mostly a damaging wind threat. Can't rule out a tornado again, hence why the tornado watch was issued. But for the most part, these storms are probably going to start to lose a little bit of steam since we're going to be starting to lose our stability. Or we've already started, honestly. Sun has set. Cold air is rushing in a little bit tonight. So I'm not expecting a whole lot more out of this storm system than what we've already gotten, which was a surprise anyway, because originally we started out this day as a marginal risk. The storm system will move off to the south and east, cause some rain, maybe a couple booms of thunder, and beyond that, that's really it. Doesn't really become a very impactful storm system. It's going to be more impactful north of the border than anything else, but really going to be uneventful there. We'll take a very quick look at the low-level jet here real quick. It's going to be around this region. Not too much going on. Again, there's a small little area where we have a slight wind maximum here, where we're getting towards about 50 to 60 knots at the low levels. It's a key factor for tornadic development, but the other ingredients just don't really seem to be there like that. The dew points aren't super impressive. We look at the Cape here. There's not really too much energy left in the atmosphere, so not going to be too concerned about that, but just figured I'd at least cover it for anyone that might have been wondering and just so happened to be watching in that area. But where we're most interested is in the storm system and the severe threat on Tuesday. Before I jump into that, let me go ahead and look at our outlook here for Tuesday. Still at an enhanced risk, but I do think some potential change could be ahead. We'll go to day 4 here. It'll be interesting to see what they change this to tomorrow, because I do think some parameters are there which could probably lessen the risk, if anything, as of right now. And I wouldn't even say that it's a guarantee that that's going to happen. I find those parameters of more so uncertainties than anything else. But we look at the synopsis here. Everything else still seems to be in place. But one thing I will note is there is a bit of a discrepancy that's developed in between the models. Cue the internal screaming. But well, let's go ahead and take a look at the vorticity maps, and I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about here. So here we are. We're looking at the wee hours of the morning on the 29th, which is when our storm system is expected to roll in. And one odd feature with this storm system, and this isn't anything new, the severe weather threat's expected down here, but the upper forcing is going to be all the way up here, actually. And this is going to be moving pretty quick, so there's going to be a little bit of a tougher time trying to get these storms to lift. And what I mean by lift is getting that warm air to lift into the higher levels of the atmosphere where the storm can really start to blossom. So that's going to be a trick. I mean, that's going to be a little bit of a trick right there in its own right. But we'll go further into why the threat for severe weather exists at such abundance right now. And it's going to have to do with this little area back here. Move this storm system along, get a pretty good bit chunk of cold air behind it, and this is how we're going to end up getting a nice little swath of snow around the central part of the U.S. And then this will move along into the Great Lakes and become a impactful storm over there. So we'll go ahead and go to the GFS now and make a little comparison. There is a slight difference here. This trough digs a little bit further south, so that upper level forcing is closer. More lift seems to be available towards this region. One thing that I do see in common between both of these models is there's a decent amount of Gulf of Mexico moisture that's flowing in. So that, coupled with the warm sector that's going to develop here, because you can see this small little ridge that's developed, that's indicative of warm air coming in. It's going to create an environment that's more favorable around this region. I do think the threat could potentially move east a little bit, but for the most part, I'm in agreement with what the Storm Prediction Center is highlighting. Move this a little bit further along again. Still, the forcing's a little bit too far to the north, and this is also why I think anywhere east of Alabama isn't really going to be looking at too big of a severe threat. There is still a little bit of a warm sector aloft, but I don't think the moisture return is going to be good enough to really trigger severe development. But we'll have to see. I don't rule out a marginal or even a slight risk issue. I don't think a robust severe weather threat or severe weather outbreak will happen on Wednesday, but we can't rule out a handful of thunderstorms potentially going severe. All right. So let's go over to the part where things kind of get interesting. And here is where a lot of the uncertainty kind of kicks in. For one, this system on the Euro moves a lot faster than what the GFS is showing us. We still get that snow belt as well around the central part of the U.S., particularly through Colorado, Nebraska, even some parts of Kansas. We got Iowa, southern Minnesota, northern Wisconsin in play here. That much holds. The odd part is going to be this severe threat here. With the lack of lift, it's going to be a little bit harder to hone in on our severe threat, and this will also kind of limit our tornado threat. There isn't a lot of helicity available, so the tornado threat looks like it could be a little bit more subdued, but I do think an increased wind threat might result out of that as well. This is a marginal severe threat, though, as with a more progressive trough, you aren't really able to get that same kind of forcing that you would get if the trough was moving just a little bit slower. So this moves along, and then here is our setup on Wednesday morning. It looks like a huge mess of weather for the southeast. Couldn't rule out a flooding threat with this, but this definitely looks like it's going to be a nuisance at the very least. Beyond that, though, as far as wintry weather, there's not really a lot going on, but also I can see that another storm system will be taking shape around the northwest. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like on the GFS. I don't know why all this has been highlighted, but GFS has a slightly different look. This storm system looks like it's moving a little bit slower. We'll move this back just a little bit. But it looks like, if anything, there's a little bit longer of a snow shield as well. but this storm system moves a little bit slower, and it could be more of a nocturnal threat as a result. Still questions as to what kind of mode we will get with those storms, because this isn't like a super high resolution model like the Euro and pivotal weather, unfortunately. So I do have some questions, but this also could lean into a more of a severe threat on Thursday. Also a little bit colder. Also with it hanging back a little bit more, it could be a little bit colder on the backside of this. So more snow for maybe areas of Michigan, parts of Ohio as well, maybe even getting into the Northeast as well. Of course, we're past the 90-hour mark on this as well, so I'm not going to be able to really compare this hour's Euro run to the GFS, unfortunately. Might go over this again in the morning and we'll see how things go. But one other thing that I was seeing in previous model runs, if we go back, was I was seeing almost like a secondary low pressure that pops up right here and causes this trough to dip a little bit further. But on this run, it doesn't look like I'm seeing that anymore. See, like you see an area of high pressure, if anything, that kind of pushes this into a little bit more of a ridge, if anything. But earlier we were looking at low pressure, and if that dipped the trough more, that could create more lift around this environment, creating a more favorable and unstable environment as well. But you gotta love one of the many intricacies of weather. So before we move on to the wintry side, let's go ahead and look at one last thing where we look at the low-level jet here, because this is going to be a crucial factor in regards to severe weather and tornadic development in particular. Without this low-level jet, a lot doesn't happen. So here we are, we move on to the 28th. Here's the 29th. We get into the early afternoon here. And we have these little small areas right here where we're getting into this little red region right here. This is where we're starting to get into that 50 knot range, maybe even 55 or more. So the area in question could end up becoming an area of interest in regards to tornadic activity. Although the Cape does not look impressive over this region now. There's a lot of things that are kind of leading into it not being a severe threat, but one run it could be like this, the next run it could be turned over on its head completely. So this is going to be one of those kinds of forecasts, it looks like, unfortunately, which gives me a headache every once in a while, but this is part of the territory. But as of right now, I'm not quite as sure about the severe weather threat. I still think it'll happen as of right now. The next run will tell us a lot. But GFS honestly has me thinking leaning into more of an overnight threat, especially towards Alabama. Let's go ahead and look at this. And when we look at this, the shear is pretty impressive, but again, Cape isn't impressive. There's a decent little curve in this hordeograph here, but other parameters don't seem to be all that impressive. So a lot more uncertainty is kind of developed here. It's going to be a pretty tough, pretty frustrating forecast over the next couple of days. Hopefully by the next run we start to get some clarity here. But last but not least, now we're going to go ahead and look at the snow totals. It's going to be really brief for right now. But the main area that I think will end up being the big winner here will be over towards northern Wisconsin, where we could get possibly up to 8 inches of snow, maybe even an isolated area of 10 inches. I did see a flash of that. In fact, there it is right there. But beyond that, I'm expecting 4 to 6 inches throughout the central part of the U.S. Then once we get over towards the Rockies, we can start to get into that 6, 8, maybe even somewhere we could get 10 inches towards the higher elevations. In fact, I just flashed by an area that we could get that. And then, of course, over towards the west, we are still very snowy. Towards the mountains here, we could get up to about 3 feet up in Washington and Oregon. And then over towards towards the more interior northeast. More so in the valleys, we could still get up to about 6 to 8 inches in a lot of places. We compare, so that's the blend of models here. We compare that to the Euro. For the most part, it's in concurrence, but it does have a tiny little area here towards the Great Lakes where we could be seeing about up to 14, maybe even 16 inches of snow. The Canadian model is a little bit more in concurrence with the National Weather Service here. And then we have the GFS, which is a little bit more, it's a little bit more aggressive, albeit not by much, which is a good sign here. The Euro also is kind of showing this here, so this could be interesting as well, where we get a swath of maybe about 12 to 14 inches here. We'll have to see how this lake plays into things. Are we getting a hint of a potential lake effect system? I'm doubtful, but you never know with those. You never know with that wild card in effect here. We've seen what the lake effect machine can ultimately do here, so all we can do with that is wait with bated breath. And I'm sure you guys over towards Buffalo in particular are probably saying, oh no, no more, I'm already done for this year. Well, all I can say is just prepare now. I hope that you get the outcome you want. But that's the end of this video here. If you liked what I did in this one, definitely drop me a like. Greatly appreciate that. Let me know in the comments what you think is going to happen with the severe weather threat. Is this going to downtrend? Is it going to uptrend? And of course, I see that 70% of you that watch my videos haven't subscribed yet. So if you like what I'm doing, why haven't you? Why not? But other than that, this has been Tire Metalhead Weatherman. I'll see you guys in the next video. You guys take care.